Today we're going to run through 5 quick meta takes from what we've seen thus far in the kickoff tournaments. The first one is that Viper is absolutely destroying right now. She has a 67% pick rate in EMEA, 76 in Pacific, and 83 in Americas, which is an absolutely crazy amount. It means that right now, Viper is kind of at the same average as Chamber's highest ever pick rate for an international tournament, which was Masters Copenhagen. So think of peak Chamber days. That's kind of at the level that Viper is at right now. And of course, that could have been even more. And I did mention this when they decided to keep Ascent and rotate out Haven instead. Had they decided to flip that around, which I think would have been perhaps a more popular decision overall, actually, we might even see even more Viper, right? It could have been even higher than this number right now. So looking longer term, it probably seems like Viper certainly has to get nerfed considering the astronomical pick rate she's at right now. And especially when you also consider that they nerfed Skye, and we'll get to that in a second, and so you might have thought that Double Controller would die down somewhat. It seems like it has not had that much of an impact on Viper's pick rate overall. For number 2, let's talk about that Skye nerf, because it seems like the nerf has worked pretty much, because you can see that Skye has a 33% pick rate here in Americas, in Pacific it's 24%, and in EMEA it's 29%. And those are certainly coming down from the high 40s or above 50% numbers we were seeing last year, and it's a much more reasonable level. Ideally, I think anywhere from about a 15 to a 35% pick rate is a pretty healthy level to be, and Skye is falling within that range in all 3 of the regions right now, so it seems like Skye seems to be still playable, still is seeing some play overall, but definitely isn't dominating, and some teams are looking in different directions to find something else for their comp rather than sticking with the Skye. Some of the bigger winners from that Skye nerf, of course, been some of the other initiators, but in particular, Gecko is actually starting to finally see some play. In Americas here, he's at 19%, we got 16% in Pacific, and in EMEA, it's actually 25%. So again, Gecko is actually starting to see some level in the meta, and again, it's kind of in that healthy range for all 3 regions. Yoru is another one who has seen quite a bit of play, particularly here in EMEA, where Yoru actually has a higher pick rate than Jet thus far. Now again, this is a very small sample size and not all the teams have played, but particularly in EMEA right now, we are seeing a ton of Yoru. And again, whether it's Gecko or Yoru, those agents are getting picked more because they're doing some of the job that Skye was doing, whether it's pop flashes for the Yoru or whether it's for Gecko trying to be that initiator that's getting information as well as having a flash. Number 4 here is going to be about the Sentinel meta, because we've seen since the last time we played at Champs, there's been multiple little Killjoy nerfs that have come about, and of course a big Cypher buff, and a Chamber buff now is on its way as well. So a lot of people perhaps thought that the Sentinel meta would change quite a lot, and it has changed a bit, but Killjoy is still surviving. She still has a 33% pick rate in Americas, a 47% pick rate in Pacific, and in EMEA it's 38%. So Killjoy is still definitely sticking around and is not, out of the meta completely. She hasn't been replaced by Cypher. Actually, in all 3 regions, Cypher has a lower pick rate. Now, it is definitely more competitive than it was last year when Killjoy was often the most picked agent in the entire game. So certainly we have more competition, and certainly other agents, and maybe with the new Chamber buff, we'll start to see a bit more Chamber as well. Who knows? But Killjoy is still a decent pick, and particularly on maps, of course, like Ascent and Icebox coming back, of course, was pretty important for Killjoy. And even on Lotus, where many, myself included, perhaps thought that, Killjoy wouldn't necessarily be the go-to pick on Lotus all of the time anymore, actually she has been thus far pretty much in all 3 regions. And the last one here is that there's only 2 agents that haven't been played thus far across all of the games we've seen so far, and I'll let you have a little think who you think that might be. It's Deadlock and ISO, the 2 newest agents to the game. And obviously the Deadlock buff, we all perhaps had some hopium that the Deadlock buff, would mean that we would see some Deadlock. And we have seen some Deadlock in some of those Tier 2 games, but unfortunately that hasn't translated over to the Tier 1 games, at least not yet. And ISO as well, obviously he did get a little mini buff as well that we've seen more recently coming in. But also that seems to have not really done too much for ISO's pick rate overall, as it seems like many of the Tier 1 teams think that there are just better options. So that was just a quick little note on some of the things we've seen thus far. Of course, it's still very early on, but once all of the kickoff tournaments are over, and we'll add in the Chinese tournament into this as well, I then will do a more detailed breakdown of, which agents are doing well, which ones aren't doing as well, so that we can see and get a really clear picture of where the meta is.